This video is on the 5 steps to transforming your being. Now, I'm making this video because a few weeks back, probably about 6 weeks back now, I'm guessing, I did a video on the be, do, have model. We were talking about being. And in that video, I'm not going to go into the same stuff again here. You can check out a link around here somewhere. But in that video, I was talking about how everything emerges from being. Everything emerges from how you are being. Okay, how you are being in the moment, what your behavior is going to likely bubble up spontaneously from that. Like, I'm not picking my next words out my mouth right now. They're bubbling up from my being. So your being creates your doing, and your doing creates the results that you get. Or that's how you engage with the world, and you co-create the results that you're going to get with the world. So what we want to do, if we want to become more effective at creating the results that we want to create in our lives, we want to make sure our being is aligned with that. We have the kind of being, we're coming from the kind of being from which an appropriate engagement emerges to co-create those results. So I got a bunch of questions, got a bunch of people saying, well, how do you transform your being? You know, what does that mean? And that is a very, very good point. So we're going to go through the 5 steps to transforming your being inside of this video. This video is sponsored by the Nexus, a year-long immersion in personal transformation and results creation with tuition and mentoring from me, James Tripp, and peer support from an array of incredible individuals making up the senior community that is going to catalyze the results that you want to bring into your world. For details, check the card in the video or the link in the About section. First thing I want to say about being, so as you understand this, is your being is not who you really are, right? In some absolute sense. It's not the facts out there in the world about who you are. It is how you are creating yourself from the inside out, inside of that moment. So we do not have a stable being, we have a being in the moment. So I might be in one situation where I am in flow, for example, right? I'm in a flow state, I'm creating very naturally, very easily with the dynamics of the moment. That's my being in the moment, right? I've got a good grounding, I'm in flow. If I were somewhere else and I were going, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do or not, I might be in hesitance and insecurity. That would be my being in the moment, okay? So your being isn't some immutable thing, it is how you are being in the moment. Now, underpinning all of our beings, all of our different sort of states of being that might show up here and there, are often some broad underpinning understandings of the world, okay? So I'm not saying that each of the beings has nothing to do with each other, but they often, you know, we can literally be seeing the world one way in one moment, and that will create a certain ground of being, and then the next moment we're seeing it differently. Now, this is quite a significant thing. A lot of people will say, well, I don't know, you know, one minute I know what I want to create health, vitality, these kind of things. The next minute I'm eating a donut. Why does that, you know, why is that? Because you've gone into a different ground of being. You've gone into a different experience of self, of the moment, a different set of priorities, these kind of things. I've talked about this elsewhere in my 4 Elements Mind Management material, but we're taking a similar idea from a different perspective. What we're looking at doing here is not managing our being in the moment necessarily. We're looking in this video at how you do what I call personal alchemy, the underpinning of personal alchemy. That's changing a particular being in the moment. I sometimes call this a trance because I operate a lot in the world of hypnosis, and that's a way of making sense of it that makes sense to people in that world. Okay, we're never fully being absolutely who we are. We're only being the trance we're in the moment, right? And when we're in that trance, there's a certain set of understandings we're seeing the world through, and every other way of seeing the world has been excluded. Every other way of being for us has been excluded. So we end up dropping into a particular state of being. So we're looking at how to transform those. I sometimes talk about trance repertoires, by the way, as well. So each trance is a different ground of being in the moment, and we will do life through a certain set of trance repertoires. So it's extremely rare that people are inconsistent with their trances in particular contexts, right? So somebody who has a fear of public speaking usually has a fear of public speaking regardless. Maybe there are some variables that change it, but that's the trance in the moment, in that context. That's the ground of being that's going to show up in that moment. If a person wants to change that, instead of managing it in the moment, which I call mind management. There's lots of good stuff you can do if you're in a situation you go, well, this isn't a useful way to be. There are maneuvers you can make, I call this mind management, that can shift your ground of being in that moment. But ideally, you want to think, well, what's the ground of being that's going to serve every time this context shows up, so I don't really have to do as much mind management or any mind management at all. If we're looking to change at that level, we're looking at what I call personal alchemy. And we're going to be looking at a broad top-level framework for that kind of personal alchemy here in this video, 5 steps. Okay, so step number 1, I'm going to refer to my notes here. I don't normally do that in the video, but I'm just going to refer to my 5 steps. So step number 1 is recognize that your being, how you're being in the moment, is a creation, and you are the creator. Okay, this is the most fundamental step. This isn't just going, oh, I get this idea. I mean, recognize, see it, witness it. We human beings, I think it's David Bohm who said our mind makes up the world and then says I didn't do it. Well, our mind makes up the moment and then says I didn't do it. Our mind makes up our experience and then says I didn't do it. If I'm feeling insecure in a particular moment, my mind made it up, but it doesn't feel like my mind made it up. It doesn't feel like I made it up, which I did outside of consciousness. It feels like a thing that happened to me, right? And this is embedded in culture, by the way. People say, well, you know, I can't help the way I feel. This kind of thing. That's an unsurprising term to hear. It's a cultural expression. I can't help the way I feel, right? This is to suggest that how I feel in the moment, it's got nothing to do with me, right? But it does. We do not feel the world around us. We feel the way our mind is making it up to be. So our ground of being in the moment is a creation. Now, I often kind of I have this analogy I sometimes share with clients. You know, somebody might find themselves repeatedly in the same kind of state. And I'll say, well, how did you cook that up? What's the recipe? And they go, well, I didn't really. And I say, you know, you're like somebody who's just baked a cake. I've walked into the kitchen and caught you. You're covered in flour. The oven's still hot. And I say, great cake. Fantastic work. And you say, what? I didn't bake it. They go, what do you mean? And you go, well, cakes, they just appear. Right? This isn't how we work. We bake up our ground of being. We have a recipe for it in a moment. Okay? And that brings us to point number 2. So once we can acknowledge I am the creator of this state, right? It isn't just a thing that happens to me. It is a thing that I create, albeit outside of consciousness. We can move to going, what's the recipe? Okay? So our second point on here is to understand how it is created. Okay? It's all very well known, well, I create my state, but if we can't know how we do it, if we can't witness how we're doing it, it's very, very difficult to intervene. Okay? And the way we create our state or ground of being is through the sense we are making in the moment, the ideas we are bringing to bear upon the moment. Now, people think that ideas, like the world is the world is the world, and our ideas are just how we sort of dryly and intellectually understand it. But they're not. They're literally how our experience is shaped. Okay, so whether you call these concepts or ideas or thoughts or whatever, I'm going to call them concepts because this is the way that I look at things when I get deeper into this stuff. Like a concept or an idea has 2 functions. The first function is external. It's to reach out to the world and take a hold of something. So if I've got an idea of guitar, that concept helps me make sense of the instrument that's in front of me, helps me go, oh, I know this, and I know something about the potentials of it, and my concept of guitar contains connections to other concepts, so I can interact with it and make use of it. So our first function of concepts and ideas is to reach out to the world to help us to work with what's in the world, to make sense of it and work what's in it. That's function number 1. Function number 2 of our ideas is that they create our state. Okay, that's the second function. They create our state. So they create the way I will feel about something, either subtly or strongly. Right? I might not notice a shift in my ground of being when I look at a guitar and go, guitar. Right? But I've made a whole bunch of sense in that moment about that thing in relation to me. and my state will shift. If I have an awareness for it, I can notice that state shift, but mostly we're inside of it so we don't notice, and mostly we want to be inside of it. We don't want to be disembedding and going meta to useful states, only unuseful states, right? Or to put that differently, we don't want to be disembedding and going meta. We don't want to be getting up above useful grounds of being, only unuseful ones. When people get up above a useful ground of being, that can cause problems. In golf, there's a term called the yips, where somebody suddenly becomes aware of what they're doing, so they come out of the ground of being they need to be in, and they end up above it in a meta position to it. Okay, so that's worth being aware of. So when you've got these two functions of ideas, reaching out to the world, creating our ground of being, it's worth recognizing that function number one is always imperfect, because whatever you think about something in the world or some state of affairs, those thoughts are never the thing. Those thoughts are never the state of affairs, right? So I'm holding out my hand in front of me, but I understand it as a hand. And where are all those understandings? They're up here in my head. So those understandings cannot be the same thing as the hand out here or the object out here, right? There's always a gap. The map is not the territory. So function number one is always imperfect, always. Function number two is always perfect. Always perfect. Our thoughts, our ideas, our conceptual renderings will create our experience of the moment, our experience of ourselves, all that happens in the moment, and it will do so perfectly. Whatever we believe is true in that moment unconsciously will create our ground of being in that moment. Okay, so our medium, what we want to work with, is our conceptualizations and our sense making. This is the important thing. This is how we work with our ground of being. Step number three, once you understand these 2 points, and by the way, I just want to say this quickly, I'm coming in here at the top level. Don't watch this video and think, oh, should I understand that fully and completely? I've spent years developing my understanding and skills with personal alchemy, absolutely years, and I am not at the pinnacle of this craft. I am still learning, I'm still developing my own expertise and my own capabilities, okay? And I always will be. There's no end point. There's no point where you can't get any better at it. But point number three, once you understand these first 2 points, step number three is to prioritize ground of being over truth. Right? This is a really important point. Prioritize ground of being over truth. I sometimes talk about the truth trap. And the truth trap is when we are caught chasing truth and we are ignoring how the ideas we're using to chase the truth are creating our ground of being, whether they're creating a good, useful, resourceful ground of being, or whether they're creating an undermined, unresourceful ground of being. So we human beings tend to be truth addicted. It's like, well, I just got to figure this out, right? So people go, well, am I doing the right thing here? I don't know. I need to find out. And they go into a thought process that's about trying to find out the truth about whether the decision they're about to make is the right one, for example. But the question is what is that thinking creating? And is that creation serving you? So what I often say to people is calibrate to state or calibrate to ground of being, not to truth. Because remember, function one of thoughts, ideas, concepts, these kind of things is always imperfect. You do not get to know the truth. Whatever ideas you have about the world, they're not the truth. They're just the sense that you have made. It may bring you closer to the truth or further away from the truth, but it's never going to be the truth. So you may as well accept the imperfection at that level. Now the question is this, regardless of what's going on in the world, would you prefer to be showing up and meeting that at your best, your most generative, your most creative, your most adaptive, or you want to be meeting that like in some place of insecurity and not knowing what's going on and like dithering or whatever it might be? Right? So you want to learn to prioritize your ground of being over truth. Most people think, well, if I know the truth, I'll be in a better position to control the variables out there in the world. Right? But out there in the world is complexity. You have very little control out there. Right? You have influence, and that influence resides in how you choose to engage with and dance with each moment as it comes up, how you choose to meet the moments of your life, how you choose to meet the world, how you choose to engage with it, right? So ground of being becomes the most important thing. This is really massive, by the way, because if you believe that chasing the truth is more important, and if you believe you can actually reach the truth, I call it a sucker's game, like the coconut shy. Excuse my dog in the background, he's going to bark away. Like the coconut shy, where the coconut's nailed down, you keep chucking the rocks, that coconut's nailed down. Chasing the truth is often like that, right? It's a sucker's game. You're not going to get there. You're just going to get your ideas, your sense. But you will always create a ground of being. The question is, are you creating a ground of being that is serving you in meeting the world, engaging with it, creating the results that you want, be, do, have? Or is it a ground of being that isn't serving you? Okay, so calibrate to ground of being first. This is step number 3. Always calibrate to ground of being over truth. Step number 4 is develop your matrix vision. Okay, now what I mean by your matrix vision is I've just said that our experience, our ground of being in the moment is resultant from the sense making we're doing, the way we are making sense of this moment. Now, most of the time we don't know how we're making sense of the moment because we're acting and reacting through that sense. We are seeing the world through that sense. We are not seeing that sense. So, you know, I said when you're in like a good state, you don't want to come up and go and meta to it and look at it and look into what creates it. You don't want to do that. But if you're in a bad state or an unuseful ground of being, then you want to develop this vision, right? This matrix vision. You want to be able to get up, look into the code, you know. So in the film The Matrix, Neo learns to see all the zeros and ones. Right? This is what I mean kind of like by matrix vision. You see the conceptual units that are creating the state that you're in, right? So when I'm doing this for myself, one of the tools I use, which I talk about, which I'm going to be teaching in the Nexus, that I make major use of is felt sense, right? It's using my interoceptive systems, and I'm not going to get into why this works, but I recommend reading Lisa Feldman Barrett's book, How Emotions Are Made, if you want to understand how your interoceptive system is used in your emotional and cognitive processing. So you use your interoceptive system to feel in and uncover the sense that is creating the state of being that you're looking to change, right? So for me, I'm going to feel it. I'm going to go, okay, so what's happening here? How am I creating this? Right? I'm going to feel, I'm going to start getting things popping because I want to know the sense that I'm making. I want to bring it into consciousness. When I do, I go, oh, I see. I'm thinking that I can't handle this situation, or that people are going to think this about me, and that further means that I am prioritizing the opinions over others over my own judgment, and and I can go into the matrix. So this skill of developing matrix vision, this grows and grows and grows. The more personal alchemy you do, the more it grows. The more you listen to other people and how they're organizing their reality, the more it grows. I just want to say here as an aside, one of the aspects of the Nexus is co-coaching, right? Buddying up with people and co-coaching. I've pointed out in this that by doing this, by coaching others, particularly from the perspective of looking into their matrices, into their grounds of being, into their underpinnings, you start to develop an enriched palette for sampling people's organization of reality. Like a sommelier or someone who's an expert wine taster they have a highly discriminating palate. They can pull out a lot of information from tasting wine, right? And they have to develop that. When you listen to people speak, you're hearing much of the sense they're making of the moment, right? And you learn to listen into that and listen for the implications in terms of the ground of being it's creating. That's extremely useful to do with other people because it makes you better at doing it with yourself. Okay, so there's a dividend that gets paid from working with and coaching other people. So inside of the Nexus where people are co-coaching, I'm pointing out to people that doing the coaching isn't just about helping that person, you're helping yourself in the process because you're developing this palette of discernment. So point number 5, the final stage of personal alchemy, right? Transforming a ground of being, is to choose new sense intentionally. Now, this is impossible to do if you're still caught in the truth trap, if you're still caught in the idea that some of your thoughts are actually facts, some of your ideas are actually truths, right? Now, really, I'm not saying that some ideas don't bring you closer to the truth than others. Of course, I believe that is the case, but they never are the truth. Now, if you can let go of them being the truth, then you can bring in a new truth. That's got to be one that resonates for you, right? It's got to be one that you go, yeah, that feels true, right? And it's got to be one that feels empowering, that creates a ground of being that's more functional. So there's two function sets. It's not just a matter of like arbitrarily forcing some weird new reality on yourself. There's some skill, again, using felt sense in feeling in. Sometimes I talk about this, by the way, felt sense, as being like developing an understanding of color if you were a painter, right? Color and brush stroke. So if you're a painter and you're painting, you need to be able to see the color and how the colors work together to know whether your painting's coming together. If you had a blindfold on and you were painting, you couldn't do it. You couldn't paint a new picture. So when you're creating a new ground of being, you need to be able to feel into the felt sense, which is like the artist being able to see the color, right? It's a different modality. So as you feel in and you're bringing in new sense making, you're bringing in new concepts, you're able to get some feedback to go, yeah, that's good, that works. Like a painter needs feedback to be able to paint. So you need this feedback in choosing a new sense. It's not just some dumb process of going, oh, I'm going to believe this now. So you need the internal skills. This is an important thing. And I pointed this out before when I've taught aspects of personal alchemy. Personal alchemy is not about process. I've made up a 5-step process here, okay? Is this the process? Maybe. I don't do it like this and go, right, where am I? Step 3? Right, when I'm doing personal alchemy for myself, it's a more fluid thing because it's an embodied skill set. So this is an important thing. So that's my answer to the question. This has been a longer video than I intended. If you're still here, I guess it means you've been getting some value from this, or you're utterly enraged. Whichever it is, you might as well give it the thumbs up anyway. And like and subscribe if you're interested in using your mind to shape your life more and more effectively. Right now, if you're interested in joining the Nexus, it's the beginning of year 1 of the Nexus. It is about creating yourself to create the life you want, to be more adept at creating the life you want. I'm not going to go into the details of what's in there. I'm just saying the first live session, at the time I'm recording this on a Saturday morning. Sunday is tomorrow. This is going to be the first live session inside of the Nexus. We're looking at intentionality, motivation, and realization. Okay, intentionality, motivation, and realization. So what this means is intentionality. That means using your intention. What am I doing here? What am I creating here? What's the next move? This kind of thing. Living on purpose, right? But how that relates to motivation, right? Our motivation is part of our ground of being. Do I feel like moving towards this thing, moving away from it? Am I rising up? Am I laying low? Am I procrastinating? Or am I diving in? Right? That's all ground of being stuff. And it relates to intention, what we're looking at and how we're looking through that intention. Okay, what we want to create, but how we're thinking about what we want to create. So intentionality, motivation, and realization. By realization, I mean making something real, right? So how do we go from having an intention to having that intention making a difference through our engagement with the world, through our action in the moment? How do we go from that to it actually realizing a thing and becoming more adept at doing this? And by the way, I'm talking about this on a variety of levels. It could be big stuff you want to bring into the world, big projects, or it could be small shifts in the moment, perhaps in a conversation with another person. So that's what we're doing in the first live session in the Nexus. If you haven't joined the Nexus yet, you'll find details around here as to how to do that if that's something you're interested in. If you have any questions about anything in this video, please do make use of that comment section. And until we next connect, keep on using your mind to shape your life.